Okay, so here we have this interval from A to F, and I'm going to ask a volunteer from the internet world. I'm going to ask Shannon, what is the size of that interval? What's the name for that interval? A to F.
A 6.
A 6, but what kind of 6? Minor 6, major 6, diminished 6?
Minor.
Minor is correct. Very good. Okay, now let's say that I change that to F sharp. So I made it 1/2 step bigger, right? Okay, now I'm going to ask Jules and Nabi. All right, I notice we have 2 Julias here, so we're safe. It's okay, ladies and gentlemen. Both Julias are here, so everything's okay. All right, so Julia and Nabi. Now I changed the F to F sharp. All right, what is the name for that interval now?
Major?
Yes, major 6, so it's 1/2 step bigger than it was the previous version, so now it's a major 6. Okay, well, why stop there, right? All right, so what if I could make it A double sharp, but I'm not going to do that. I can make it A flat, right? And that makes it 1 bigger. All right, now we've never officially talked about this. I don't know, maybe we have. Okay, other Julia Harris. Now what is the name for this interval? You may or may not know this, but.
I probably don't.
Okay, well, it was a major 6. Well, what's the topic of today's subject?
Augmented 6.
Augmented, so that's what we're, okay. So 1 bigger than a major 6, if it's 1/2 step bigger, is an augmented 6. So augmented 6 chords are going to have this interval of the augmented 6. Now this is an interesting interval because as you can see now, a lot of these things here, and when we're talking about augmented 6 chords, I'm going to present them in C major because that's a key we can all easily relate to. And then obviously you know that we can transpose this to all of the other 11 keys on your own time. You can go home and transpose this to E flat, D flat, whatever you want to do. You can transpose to any key, but just going to keep it simple by most of the examples will be in C major. Okay, so, but notice that in this case, the F sharp is just a 1/2 step below G. So it kind of wants, it's a kind of a tendency tone. It wants to go to G. And the A flat is 1/2 step above G. So it kind of wants to go to G. Now this is the particular situation that the augmented 6 chords will always be in, is that G is 5, it's scale degree 5, probably either a 5 chord or something very closely related to a 5 chord. And this augmented 6 chord is going to be a dominant preparation chord. Remember when we talked about Riemann at the beginning of this year, or at some point, and dominant preparation chords. So this is a chord that prepares the dominant, and it prepares the dominant in this way by having a 1/2 step above the dominant, go down, and a 1/2 step below the dominant, go up. So you have sharp 4 and flat 6, and they both go to 5. I'm curious what would happen if I tried to play this. Now, not much, because the people at home can't hear it, and the people here can't hear it very loud, but I'm going to just try to play it anyway. Yeah, well, that was wonderful, right? Okay, so, but what you could almost hear is that those 2 1/2 steps are each going by voice leading. They're tendency tones going up to G. So it's a very strong way of preparing the 5 chord. Okay, so that's the augmented 6 chord. Now, what we have is we have 3 types of augmented 6 chords that you have to memorize. So these are 3, the official technical term is flavors. So this chord comes in 3 flavors. All right, so the first one, and you just have to memorize these. All right, so the first one has, let's look at what this has. So this has flat 6. Remember, you can transpose it to any other key as necessary, but I'm going to keep the examples in C major. So it has flat 6. It has scale degree 1 in it, and then also sharp 4. They're all going to have flat 6 and sharp 4. That's the augmented 6. Okay, and what is this called? Now is where I'm going to make sure that I have the Finale Numerics font. And let's see, text, fonts. And okay, I'm in that right font. There you go. All right, so this chord is called the Italian Augmented 6th. All right, and we abbreviate that by IT, capital I, lowercase t, and then +6. The +6 means, so this is another thing where we have a symbol instead of a Roman numeral. Remember the Neapolitan chord we used in instead of flat 2. And that seems strange to us now because now at this period in history, flat 2 is not a big deal. But way back in the 1830s, 1840s, they didn't like flat 2 because it wasn't part of any scale. So they didn't want to use Roman numeral for it. So they just used a symbol. Well, now we have something that's even more not part of the regular scale system, right? So we're going to, because there's no normal scale that has both F sharp and A flat. So we're doing something unnatural. And so instead of trying to find a Roman numeral for it, we're just going to use a symbol for it. And this is it. So Italian augmented 6. Okay, the next one, and this is an important one, has flat 6, scale degree 1, scale degree flat 3, and of course, sharp 4. Sharp 4. Okay, notice how Finale put the E flat to the right, to the left. Sometimes it does that, sometimes it, no one can figure out why it does it. I would have just put the F sharp over to the right. We know the top note has to go to the right of the lower note. Why it did that, I don't know. Okay, so, and this has a name also. So this would be, so these are all geographic names. So this would be the German augmented 6. Okay, several things to talk about at this point. First of all, why do they call it the Italian augmented 6? Well, it's really just a random name, but what it means is that it's used theoretically in Italian opera from the 18th century. Now remember, Italian opera is not only written by Italians, right? Handel wrote Italian operas, Mozart wrote Italian operas, so Italian opera is a genre, which of course does also happen in Italy, many other places as well. So, you know, they have these dramatic chords sometimes, right? Sometimes in the recitative, sometimes in the music. And that's one place where people associate this chord. So Italian augmented 6. Then why German augmented 6? Well, in the 1830s and 40s, groups of composers, mainly Carl Maria von Weber, like to experiment with kind of more exotic chords. And Weber uses this chord famously in an opera. So mainly because of that, this is the German augmented 6. Okay, so the names are more or less random, but they mean something. They're not completely random. Okay, so now though, we take a minute to think about how should we think about these chords? Well, there's many ways, but one way that I would suggest is you can think of the German augmented 6 chord as kind of the default augmented 6 chord, sort of generic, standard, default is a good word, augmented 6 chord. All right, so, and then let's look at what that is then. Well, the German augmented 6 chord is the flat 6 chord, right? It's A flat, the flat 6. So it's a triad built on flat 6. Remember last week in modal mixture, we talked about that chord, how that's one of the coolest chords there is the flat 6 chord. So A flat, C, E flat, plus sharp 4. So you can remember the German augmented 6 chord is the flat 6 chord plus sharp 4. Okay, so if you think of that as that's your default, then you can think of the other two as some permutation of that. Well, so the Italian augmented 6 is a permutation that doesn't have the complete flat 6 chord. It has the root of it and a third, but it doesn't have the fifth of that chord. So it's just missing the E flat, the fifth of that augmented 6 chord. And you can sort of, so in other words, you can think of the Italian as a version of the German augmented 6 chord. Okay, now the question is how do you memorize these things? Because that's what you have to do. Well, one way is to do what I've just suggesting, is if you think of it as a flat 6 chord plus sharp 4. Okay, the other way is you can memorize what scale degrees are involved. And so again, so in that case, the German augmented 6 would be flat 6, 1, meaning the tonic, right? Flat 3 and sharp 4. Okay, so either think of it as some version of the flat 6 chord or just memorize the scale degrees. And as I said, there's one more. So, but wait, there's more. You also get, for your same monthly payment, you also get another additional. Can you believe that? Not just 2, but an additional augmented 6 chord. All right, and it's going to be C, and it's going to have D in it. And then F sharp. And so what is the name of this? Anybody want to say what is the name of this one? Yes, French, so FR plus 6. Now, let me just say, plus 6, that since these are all geographical abbreviations, some people like to abbreviate German, I've noticed, to GR, right? Make them all 2-letter. like postal codes or something. But it should be GER, right? It's not a big deal. I know what you mean, but should be GER. The other ones are 2 letters. Okay, why is this French? Well, this was used by French composers even later in the 19th century. As you can tell, this one is a little bit more dissonant. And so sort of the second half of the 19th century, some French composers did start using this chord. So it is kind of French in a way. And it has some interesting properties that we'll talk about later. Actually, all these chords have some interesting things about them, but I'm not going to mention too much right at the beginning.